Today, we're going to be continuing our conversations about security by talking with Arctic Wolf, a VC-backed managed security provider, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Future Tech video podcast. The audio version of this podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most of the others, or you can find it at futr.buzzsprout.com. Today, we're talking with Arctic Wolf CEO Brian NeSmith. Now, Brian has been a fixture in the industry for quite a while. Prior to Arctic Wolf, Brian was CEO of Blue Coat Systems and Ipsilon Networks. Arctic Wolf is a rare venture-backed services company that has raised $350 million and is solving security challenges for small and mid-sized business with an eye towards the enterprise. Today, we're going to talk about the changing security landscape and how his team of security professionals solves for today's most difficult security challenges. Welcome, Brian.
Yeah, pleasure.
So tell me about what it was that you saw in the market that was missing, that you decided to go through the crazy endeavor of being an entrepreneur and starting a company. What was the problem you were trying to solve?
Yeah, I think anybody who starts a company, I think there's a little bit of insanity involved in any person that jumps into this, because you just have to make a leap of faith in certain cases. The essence of it, if you go back to when we started back in 2012, myself and my co-founder, we had been working at other companies and seen other problems, and there were kind of some basic problems that we knew in the industry. So we just talk about time and again, there's not enough security talent to go around for all the different problems that we see in our world. There was a more fundamental issue for us, is that even with that talent, organizations struggled to have the discipline to do certain things all the time continuously. So, and we saw those things and we realized, okay, there's an opportunity here to add value. And then we could do it and build in such a way that we could fit with pretty much any type of corporation. So we, early on realized that, hey, every company's different. Some people are really strict, some are very loose, some have big security challenges, some are like, well, yeah, we got a few issues. And so we wanted to build something that we could meld into pretty much any type of organization, their security posture, recognize they don't have the talent or they may not have enough that they want, and that we want to augment and help them achieve kind of a better cyber risk measure in their organization.
Yeah. I think it's security is a really interesting space, because it is a very challenging market. Because one, it's hard to find enough talented people who have the depth of knowledge that it takes to do it. But the other piece of it is it's a very fragmented market. When I look at the market, and we've been talking to a lot of different security companies, you see a lot of point solutions, and you see a lot of things that are gathering data, but it's not being aggregated effectively into actionable information. And this has been, throughout the history of the security market. People buy stuff. It's like, oh, I gotta solve my security problem. I'll go buy a firewall, or I'll go buy the SIM, or I'll buy this. And then they put it in at great expense and great cost and labor. And then they don't have anybody who can do anything with it, right? And that's why I think, the managed solution is really an interesting space, because, we talk a lot about, somebody needs to come into the market and aggregate these products into some sort of more unified view of it. And we were talking to John Thompson, who's the former CEO of Symantec, and he said, what his big play at Symantec was to sort of create this aggregation play to, give a broad portfolio of security products. But I think that's kind of what you guys are doing, right? In a way, you have access to all this information, and you're kind of correlating and providing actionable information for people. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, I think you kind of get into the essence of one of the security problems. Like we're an industry that likes to highlight, if you would buy this thing, put it into your network, you are safe. And we've been doing that for 20 plus years, and people are still getting breached.
Yeah.
So there's I think a growing realization that you need those products. Don't get me wrong. Those are necessary elements. They're all tools that you use to make yourself more secure. But Generally speaking, the bulk of the breaches and reported problems were people that made mistakes in operations. They didn't configure it properly. They didn't update it appropriately. And that stuff, one of my venture guys on my board like to highlight is companies generally fall into two categories. They solve a physics hard problem or they solve a diet hard problem. And we're solving a diet hard problem. So what we're doing, there is innovation on the tech stack, but what we're really doing is addressing the issue, which is when you're setting up and configuring things and making sure they're maintained appropriately is a never ending job. Yeah. You wake up every morning and you do it again, and you wake up and you do it again. And most of the breaches are because people stop doing that after a while. Like this, well, I got bored of that. I'm not going to clean up the living room, and then the bad actors in, and then next thing you know, all the horrible things happen. So, I couldn't agree more. People ask me, how could I improve my security posture? I'm like, you should just have a good backup strategy and you should patch very aggressively.
Yeah.
And they're kind of shocked when I say that, because I'm not saying go buy 10 other products. I'm saying if you have a good backup strategy, you can recover from most disasters. And if you patch and set up appropriately, you're better than 99.99% of the people in the world.
Yeah. And just use the tools you already have too, is another.
Pretty much.
So, there's been some really big breaches and really significant breaches in the news lately. Obviously, SolarWinds, FireEye, Microsoft got popped. All these, ostensibly security companies that should have been able to see this coming, got popped. And I don't fault them for that, because security is very difficult to do. And if you think that you're immune to it, you're very delusional, right? But it does speak to the complexity of it. That in some cases, I think they're saying upwards of 16 months of being inside of some of these networks. I think it just shows how hard it is, even for a security company, to manage to this, and having the right kind of people in place to do that kind of assessment of a network on an ongoing basis is really, really challenging, even for the best of us, right?
Yeah, we see it time and again. I mean, we obviously the SolarWinds attack and then all the fallout that came following that. That what most people don't appreciate is the actors that are doing the attacking are sophisticated, they're persistent, they're enabled by our industry. So there are a lot of tools that we talk about out there that people have built that make it much easier for a hacker to do things, or a bad actor. And so you see a lot of investment on that side of things. So it's what we in our part of the industry call, it's the weaponization of the attack vehicles. So we walk out and we arm everybody with all these tools that, yes, we can use on the defensive side, but they can be used on the attack side. So, I think we're just, as an industry, it's a growing realization that the problems are much more serious and the actors are much more aggressive and persistent. And it's kind of scary because the job never goes away. You always wake up the next morning and you have to kind of go in with a mentality that somebody's in my network. How do I find them?
Yeah. Well, and I got to imagine you have customers who were impacted by the SolarWinds breach because it was very pervasive. Supply chain attacks like this are really interesting because when you look at sort of the life cycle of these supply chain attacks, I mean, you sort of pop the locksmith, right? And then you've got access to all their customers. And then, their customers may be similarly locksmiths for other customers, like Microsoft got breached within the SolarWinds breach. So, the complexity of it is really significant, but the lasting effect of this is going to be really substantial. How are you, as a company that, is doing these security services, how are you addressing, some of those challenges?
Yeah, I think the part of it is that we're fortunate in one way is that we built our own tech stack, so we have some control over what we're doing. So we try to manage what we're doing from a third party standpoint and doing, but we are dependent on, part of our supply chain. We depend on AWS, we depend on Azure, we depend on, Salesforce. I mean, you kind of go through the list of tools that are common, and I don't have access to their native raw capabilities of what they've got going on there. That being said, I think that what you realize, and even in the SolarWinds case, that what was impressive about this attack is how patient they were.
Yeah.
So they got the code in, they didn't do anything immediately at SolarWinds. They waited months. And then when they got it deployed into various customers' environments, they were also very patient. So it was somebody with a long, had the big goal in mind over a long time frame. That's to me what makes that interesting, clearly in an intellectual sense and scary and in an actual sense. But yeah, what do we do? It's you have no choice but to basically, in one way, be very suspicious of everything all the time and constantly re-looking at it. And then we try to put ourselves in the minds of the attackers. So if I was sitting on their side, how would I try to compromise us? And so we're fortunate in the sense that we blend the security engineers with the technology. So we have a whole team of people that are doing work on helping customers, but we also let those people do work where why don't you go pretend to be the hacker and let's see what you can do. And can you penetrate us and can you get creative and how would you do that? And then therefore, what can we use to put in place to kind of how we might see that sort of thing and understanding what's happening there. It's an arms race, a never ending battle, from a business standpoint for us, it's a very positive thing. But obviously as an industry, I'm sure it's very frustrating for people that don't live this space. Can we not just be safe? But there are answers too. You can do things to structure your infrastructure in ways where even if you do get compromised, it doesn't break everything. This whole idea of need to know and segmentation and breaking it up you can be smart about it. I just think we've gotten away with it for a long time. And I think that's coming to an end every month, every quarter, something new comes up to realize this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You're alluding to sort of the people problem, and you mentioned this earlier too. And I've always found that if you look at most organizations, 80 some odd % of outages and problems are result of some sort of human error, right? And what you're talking about really is coming in and taking a look at an environment and addressing some of the policies and procedural aspects of it rather than the tool side of it. Because I think that's the piece that people want to they buy a tool and for a quick fix, but it's really the policies and procedures in general and around that tool that drive better security. I think. Tell me a little bit about what you're advising your customers on the policies and procedures front.
Yeah, I think that in general, hygiene is typically how people fail. So they don't keep things patched, they don't maintain things. But in their defense, it's really easy to make a mistake.
Yeah.
You see the best companies in the world with the smartest people in the world. If you go watch the outages from Zoom or Microsoft or Amazon or, any of the big internet providers, it's kind of remarkable actually in many ways. It doesn't happen more often, but it does happen. And these are really smart people with smart processes. What we try to emphasize with customers is probably deploy less and do it better. So the more stuff you add into your network, that means less likely that you're going to make sure that particular portion of your infrastructure is set up appropriately. Most companies, if you have a good firewall, you have a good spam solution, a good web filtering solution, and a good endpoint solution. There's a few isolated cases where you might want to add more, but if you configure those things and then segmented your network appropriately and had a good backup strategy, and you did that well and patched, you're there. Hard part is patching's not sexy. It's so much more fun as a security engineer to go, ooh, this new widget, let's go buy that thing and pop it in the network. It's like, rather than standing up and saying, well, I'm going to go patch another 50 Windows systems today. How exciting. But that's what we try to emphasize to customers. And part of the service that we're delivering is we're not just monitoring what they're doing, but we're actually trying to guide them. Hey, pay attention to those fundamentals because that's how you're going to get blown up.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's interesting perspective to don't try to bite off too much at one time, and try to utilize the tools that you have already effectively, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned it's all this has kind of been good for business. I got to imagine like security was already difficult. Then the pandemic hits, and all of a sudden we've got everybody working from home. People are putting things in SaaS applications. People are moving things to the cloud. We got this huge distributed infrastructure and just a massively expanded attack surface, right? And then, you throw all that in, then you get the SolarWinds breach, and you have to have some people just like kind of throw up their hands and go, we can't do this. I don't know what to do. My team missed all this. We're having all these issues. Like, what do I do? I mean, you must have seen a huge uptick of business from that, right?
Yeah, the pandemic, silver lining, I wouldn't wish it on, society in general, but silver lining is just for all the reasons you highlighted, remote workforce, movement to cloud. People being able to work remotely and do it securely and safely, and people, moving, your infrastructure to the cloud. Those were trends that were underway pre-pandemic. Pandemic just kind of put an afterburner on it and accelerated us in that direction. So in general, the pandemic has been an accelerator to our business, with some exceptions. Clearly, travel, retail in certain cases, things like that. Those customers are, they're in pure survival mode, so it's not clearly doing anything. But other than that, and almost all the other industries, it's been a general accelerator to our business. The hard part is I think everybody's starting to realize that it's not tech alone to solve the problem. I need people to do this appropriately. And yes, I can be smart about automation. I can be smart about AI and machine learning and all these fancy words they throw out. But in the end, people are the way you get breached, and people are the way you protect yourselves. And using them in a good and proper manner is the answer for a lot of these people. But my sympathies are, if I was running a company, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for any size company. It doesn't matter how big you are, 10 people, 10,000 people. You have the same security issues. It's kind of frightening for those smaller organizations, especially.
Well, I want to loop back to something you said a little bit earlier about, sort of the venture-backed, services company that you are, which is kind of an unusual animal, right? I mean, because I've typically, venture companies like, gear, and they like, SaaS, and they like those types of things. But we did see a trend that was really interesting. I think a lot of VCs invested in a lot of technologies, but they didn't see the return on some of those technologies because there was an enablement gap, right? They didn't have the people to, there weren't people out there to implement some of these technologies. And we saw a little bit of a pivot, maybe end of 2019, early 2020, where we started seeing, more investment in kind of a services-based company, which was kind of an unusual move for them. But I understood where they were going with it because, in order to make the rest of it go, you kind of had the people to do it. And so it made a lot of sense. You guys have had a ton of success in the venture side. I mean, from what I'm, reading out in the world, you've raised roughly $350 million. I don't know if that's accurate, right?
That is accurate.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big chunk of change for you guys to raise. I mean, could you speak to a little bit about what it was like being a services company and trying to go that route?
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Today, we're kind of viewed in favor.
Yeah.
In the sense that people are recognizing, for all the reasons you highlighted, there's a more critical reason in the area that we provide a capability is that it's very difficult if you think about kind of the technology you need to invest and build, and we do a lot of that technology investment and build, and the people that you have to hire and train and work effectively. How do you blend those two things together? And what you realize, because the threat landscape, like we didn't know or think about a SolarWinds attack 6 months ago.
Right.
So now that all of a sudden, boom, there was a big change and the threat landscape shifted. What you realize is that the work activity that goes on for a company like us will move between tech and people all the time. And so splitting them out, you can't adapt fast enough. And this is part of what we have an advantage over a lot of companies is that we will, in most cases, respond to things that happen immediately with people. And then we start looking at how we can tech enable it and make it work more efficiently. So then that's what made us a little bit, I think ultimately what it's going to end up being a new category of a service company where the tech and people aspect of it blend and evolve and change all the time. Our early history, it was difficult to raise money.
Yeah.
I've done several startups prior to this, and I would go out and I look at kind of the B, C, and D rounds. So when I did the Series E in October, the switch flipped. Everybody kind of got the formula that we're talking about, and now they couldn't give you enough money. So but I don't want to pretend like it was easy up to that point, because prior to that point, I would go out and talk to venture capitalists, and I've talked to probably over 100 over the course of those rounds. And I go in and give them a pitch. And first of all, our first thing is we're selling to small business. And so they're like, strike one. We don't like to invest venture money into companies that sell to small business. They either wanted consumer or they wanted large enterprise.
Right.
So the second thing was, you're a services company, strike two. And I'm like, uh-oh. And so it was hard. Like the first, 5-6 years of the company, when we did the A, B, C, and D, it wasn't hard just because on reputation, I'd been successful before we ever raised the money. But in the later ones, they look at it and go, I'd struggle because services and companies that sell to small business, I don't have a good track record. But I think you're right. I think especially cybersecurity in general, I think you'll see some other industries that fall in this mode where you need people and you need tech. And if you don't control both, and the boundary between what you're doing in the tech versus what you're doing with the people moves all the time, that requires you to be a different type of services company. And that's effectively what I think we've really started to understand. And the SolarWinds attack was a good example.
Yeah.
We did a lot of manual work for our customers with people because we didn't have the automation in the way that they were dealing with it. Now we've gone back and started to add some of that automation. So if something like that happens again, we can be more efficient. But for our customers, it might be a person doing work manually that solves the problem, or it might be a machine that flagged it, and you don't know. And the threat landscape shifts and changes all the time. That's the thing. But the fundraising dynamic was really, really hard, and all of a sudden now has gotten a lot easier in what we're doing here.
Yeah, you mentioned the people equation, and I think, I remember you guys from when you were a younger company out, and you had like that office in Palo Alto, and there were a whole bunch of other startups all right in that building with you. Yeah. But you've recently moved to Minneapolis, right? Or a bulk of your operations are now in Minneapolis, from what I understand. And what I've also seen is that you've had a stream of really talented and qualified people going to your company. And that's one of the things that like gets on our radar very quickly when we see really good people going somewhere. That says something for us. And it's an interesting story because, typically, somebody who's looking for security people would be kind of going out to the valley to find, the mother lode of all the people out there. But you're kind of doing the opposite thing and having seemingly almost more success with it. And Sundesh, I don't know if you want to jump in on this too, but that's a really compelling thing for us. I mean, there must be some interesting cultural things and interesting dynamics going on there. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, it started right from the beginning. My co-founder, we worked together at Blue Coat when I was the CEO, and she ran engineering for me. When we started the company, we decided to not do engineering in the Valley, specifically because the turnover rate was too high. It's just really hard to retain and hold engineers.
Yeah.
They're talented, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of very talented engineers in the Valley and a lot of smart subject matter expertise. But we built our engineering in Waterloo, Ontario, Southern Ontario in Canada. And it has a great university environment. It's a great startup environment. The turnover there is like 3% annually. That's a bad year for us in turnover. And so that kind of helped set that up. When we originally started, we did a lot of sales and marketing in the Valley. Ultimately, I ended up hiring a leader out of Minnesota. And I found time and again, if you hire the right leader, the talent flocks to them. And so when you hire the wrong leader, it always seems to be kind of harder than it needs to be to become that successful, recruiter. But I hired a leader out of Minneapolis. And so right now, today, most of our R&D is in Waterloo, Ontario, and most of our sales and marketing is in Minneapolis. We have a security center in Utah. We have one in San Antonio, Texas, and then we have one in Waterloo as well. For us, it kind of goes to, it was a painful thing to start, but once the pandemic hit, we were already used to working remotely. So it was just, let's just jump to the end point. Everybody works remotely and go from there. But it's been for me, I think, enlightening. Don't get me wrong, the Valley has an amazing ecosystem. Yeah. So the venture people that are there, all of the kind of consultants and support infrastructure and banking, And so, me being from the Valley, living, even if we're not doing a lot of stuff there, I still leverage that ecosystem.
Right.
I see other geographies sometimes saying, well, just like the Valley. And I'm like, yeah, no. I think it works because I have a lot of connections. My CFO has a lot of connections. We're well plugged into the Valley dynamic.
Yeah.
But we can leverage the talent and capabilities around the world in what we're doing. And so, yeah, nothing against the Valley. Just worked out in this particular case that given the people I started it with and where I hired them, that's where they're located.
Yeah.
So to that point, Brian, I mean, I'm looking at your resume and it looks like you've been in a lot of these product companies like Blue Coat, now leading a services organization. What makes it different? How does the culture change in a services-based model versus a product model?
Yeah, I'd say the motion you have when a customer buys from you just in the end ends up being very different. So when you buy a product, whether it's SaaS or a box or something like that, you've got to invest in so the customer can get it installed and get it working appropriately, but then you're done. It kind of works and you don't worry about it. It's like when you buy a car, there's all this work up front about getting it all in, getting organized, and they show you how to use all the tools, and then they're out and you hold the car for 4 or 5 years and come back around. And, there's a service element that comes there. If you have maintenance problems, you want to be good and respond to that. The difference in a real services company is that every day you have to reprove yourself. So you could do a great job for the last year and we wake up tomorrow morning and do a bad job. We're in a lot of trouble. So this requires a discipline and a recognition that the job just never ends. And so that's kind of hard to get over in what you're doing as you understand that model. So there's a lot more emphasis in building internal infrastructure, understand where the work is going on, that is getting done appropriately, is it happening at the level we want, and are we delivering the service the customer wants? And that, clearly you got to hire the right kind of people, but you also have to put some infrastructure in to kind of track and measure that activity so that we can make sure it's getting done appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah, we have found in our experiences, services is hard to sell because it is you're trying to tell the customer that, hey, we think we can do it better than you. But I think that is where the value currently is, and I also think it's hard to build a culture around that because even us, for our services, delivering a service, like you said, every single day you can do something well for, many, many months. And then the one thing that you just made a bad, a bad mistake, and all of a sudden the customer's like, well, not going to do business with you anymore, So I admire the fact that you only have a 3% turnover rate. That's amazing, especially being in that kind of world.
Well, what's interesting from a security engineer standpoint is when you think about the job of a security engineer at a corporation, they do less than 30% security work. So they're actually doing non-security. So they're installing the SIEM, they're upgrading the SIEM, they're adding the log data, they're configuring, they're doing all these IT tasks, and patching and maintaining and curating the logs and all that sort of stuff. For our security engineers, when they come here, all that work disappears. Our development group, our DevOps group, our release maintenance group, that is all taken care of for them. So when they come in to do work, they're doing security, 100%. And that motivates them. And we invest and we realize that part of what we want to do is because the threat landscape shifts and changes, we have to hire, but we also have to enable people that want to learn all the time. There's new things to do. So they need to be excited, and we do. We pay for everybody. There's 2 weeks of training for all the security engineers every year. They do a lot of self-paced learning on their own, and we're excited when they do that. We recognize them, we promote them in that regard, and get them excited with it. But that aspect makes it a more attractive place for a lot of security engineers. Is all the normal If you're a security engineer at a Fortune 500 company, I guarantee you're spending way less than half of your time actually doing the security work. Our security engineers are probably closer to 80%.
Right.
We still have meetings they have to go to and some overhead they have to attend to, but we try to minimize that. And then the thing they like in addition to that is if they they need something to exist in the technology. They don't have to go through 4 levels to talk to the engineer that's doing the development. They can walk down the hall. They used to be able to walk down the hall and go tell them, this is exactly what I need. And can you have this and do it? And so you have this very tight circle, and we can innovate and deliver enhancements to our product much, much faster than anybody that's a pure product company. Because for a pure product company, security engineer talks to a sales engineer that talks to a customer success, that talks to a product manager, that then talks to the manager in engineering that actually eventually makes it to the person that does the work. Now that's 5, 6 levels removed from the person that wants, the person that can deliver. In our particular case, that just those two connect. And I see it on our internal chat channels all the time. Such and such just whipped out this one-off feature for it. Welcome this. This saves me like 4 hours a day. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that cruft, as we call it for the security engineers, and removing and constantly paying attention to that, you get a lot more leverage out of them, but you also get a much better job satisfaction. So there isn't just simply services, but their life, the life of the security engineer at Arctic Wolf is dramatically better than any other place in the world. And the ones that see and experience that, they love it.
Yeah, that 30% statistic is I hadn't thought about it in that way, but that is, you're absolutely right. I mean, they spend a whole lot of their time doing other stuff. And I could see, as a security person coming in and just doing the thing you love to do, pretty much all the time, is a real advantage.
Yeah. And they're with a bunch of peers, we have more than 100. So I think it's up close to 150 security engineers. They talk a different language. They like different stuff. And so it's their little community. I'm not even in that community. I sit at the fringe, like the poor little person hoping they'll pay attention to me. The security engineers talking about their cool stuff that they saw here or that or this tool. So, I'm not even part of the cool crowd here from the standpoint of the security people. So they tolerate me. Yeah. They tolerate me.
Security engineers are an interesting breed.
They are at that.
So tell me a little bit more about Arctic Wolf. Tell me, kind of where you see your key market, and what's your sort of key use case, and where do you guys fit into the big scheme of things?
Yeah, broadly speaking, I'll tell you a little bit about kind of where we started and then where I think we're going to ultimately end up. So we started in what the world now knows as managed detection and response. And so we didn't call it that originally, we called it continuous monitoring. And the idea is you buy all these things, put them in your network to protect you, you configure them and get them set up. And then on top of that, you then wake up and act schizophrenic, and from the standpoint of assuming that none of that's working for you. So the job of monitoring your infrastructure and understanding where it's not doing it is what we did. And that's really was our main original product. Since then, we've started to realize that that's not the only element that companies are struggling with in the broader arena of security operations. Like, in other words, how do I do and prioritize the work in my environment? And then what kind of tools do I need? And then what kind of people do I need? And then if they are able to figure that out, what they can't figure out, well, can I then hire those people and get them and make them productive and do all the things you do it? And so our current view is to fit around whatever you have in place. So you're an organization and you have a different amount of IT expertise, you have a different amount of risk profile, you have a different kind of security view of the world. And basically we've built an infrastructure that allows us to customize it so that each customer, if you're secure light, great, we'll work with you. If you're secure heavy, we'll work with you. And a simple example would be, we have a lot of customers that just want us to tell them about a problem and how to fix it. They don't care how it happened, just tell me what it is and tell me how to fix it. And then we have some that are very security sensitive, and they not only do want to know about the problem, but how did it happen? Can you give me the data? I want to look at it. And those customers are handled in the same infrastructure, in the same way, because we built it to be flexible. And this is part of that toolkit that we give the security engineers to do it. But our real goal today is now addressing what we call the cyber risk problem broadly. And you do that through a properly built security operations function. And what we want to do is augment the security operations capability that an organization needs, we can fill in all the gaps in where you don't have stuff, or you don't things, or you don't have the talent or the discipline or the money. And in almost every area where we do provide capability in that security operation umbrella, we can do it better and cheaper than they can. And we show that, because I would say now today, 75% of our business comes from taking out something the customer was doing themselves. They know that we don't have to convince them that they don't want to do it. They know they're begging somebody else to come do it for them. So that's the emphasis of the business. And so we want to help customers, and we talk about it internally on their security journey. Like there's not a destination. You're never going to arrive. So just like my arms off the camera, the endpoint is kind of undefined here. And so we help them characterize and know that they're working okay, that everything's okay. And then 2, guide them in their journey and work with them as a partner in where they're going. And those are all part of our native service that they're getting. And they're excited about that. A big part of the value proposition, they don't know what they don't know. So I would say almost half of our work is inbound requests where they come to us and they say, I think I'm compromised, I think I'm breached. And then we can quickly look at it and go, no, you're okay. So we help, even in some cases, we just help eliminate the false concerns that they have about what's going on. Users will call up and say, I typed into a website, I'm compromised. And then we can look and say, no, you probably shouldn't have gone to that website. There was some risk there, but nothing really happened in the end. So bring certainty, bring knowledge, and the goal is help them measure and assess, and then ultimately end cyber risk.
Well, and you talk about sort of the markets you're going after, which is kind of more that SMB, slice of the pie, where I got to imagine there's really tremendous need. And the other thing that's interesting about it, whereas, you talk about venture capitalists being not so more interested in the enterprise space, but the market you're trying to address is huge with tremendous need.
Well, we started down market. We've expanded now. We're closing business now with 5, 6, 7, 8,000 employee organizations. So we're getting a lot of business with upmarket as well. We still handle a lot of small customers. We actually segment our service delivery into 4 sizes. So because the nature of the kind of problems and the challenges they have are quite a bit different. But so it's, our expansion strategy to date, we're currently today only selling in North America, but our growth strategy has been by expanding up market. So we're going to continue to do so. I think 3-4 years from now, I don't think there's a single organizations of any size will be capable of handling and working with them. And we start our international expansion this year. We're starting to move into Europe and some other areas. So that's how we're going to maintain the growth strategy that we've been in the pace that we've been working to.
Yeah. I think going up market's an interesting prospect too, because I think a lot of people, when they think, well, managed security service, well, you go look at these enterprise organizations. They're going to have a security team. They're going to have a CISO. They're going to have all this stuff. But the reality is, they face the same problems everybody else is facing. Like acquiring talent is really hard, and as the threat landscape gets bigger and more complicated, it's very hard to build a security organization when that's not the core competency of most businesses, right?
Yeah, and given the turnover in that industry, so say you did need a team of 4 or 5 people doing the work that we're doing. So if you have 4 people, you lose 1, all of a sudden 25% of your capacity is gone. And if you're only got 2 or 3 and you lose 1, or you got 2, you can imagine the scenario. And this is what happens to a lot of companies. They get something up and running, and somebody quits and goes somewhere else, and then now they're kind of back to square one. And I think they, both from that reason as well as just the ability to recruit or even afford to do what they want to do, have all been motivating factors. And then you have the pandemic and move into the cloud or move into remote, and the solar winds attack. On one dimension, I'm horrified, from as a person of the world, and at the same time, as a business person, I'm looking and go, okay, there's going to be a lot more people coming our way.
Yeah. Well, and I think in smaller organizations too, it's hard to sort of allocate your talent effectively, right? And you're spending a lot of money on them, and then I find a lot of them end up, like you do say, installing servers and doing a lot of grunt work, which isn't really the best way to utilize their talent. So like having the ability to have somebody kind of come in and solve for some of those problems for you is very appealing, I would imagine.
Yeah, our real goal is to bring confidence to what they're doing in security. So it's how exactly we do that. We make it really easy to deploy. We make it easy to get in there. We bring the right talent. We help them understand it. We generally, the pricing model we have is based on the number of users and servers in their environment. And so we don't charge people by log volume, which is what's been the norm in the industry. We're only able to do that because of the tech stack and the way we handle data. What that does for a customer is lets them know that, hey, if you've got good data and we want it, we'll ask for it. And we'll even highlight to the customer, you're not sending us this data. And as a result, we're not going to be as good at what you want us to do. So send it to us. And there's no reason not to, because we're not going to charge you for it. We want you to send us the data. And that's been a big area of things on that front.
Yeah, I think you bring a really interesting perspective to this, because we have a tendency to talk about enterprise security solutions, even though they're very point solutions. I think, like broadening that picture and looking at other ways to solve the problem when, we talk about, policies and procedures and people as being, one of the biggest challenges to solve that nobody else is kind of addressing. It's really interesting to see a company like yours with the resources and the backing that you have, tackling that challenge and then going up market. I think is really an interesting thing, and I see why there's a lot of people heading over towards your company lately.
Well, we're excited about it.
Yeah, well, you should be.
Well, I think the funny thing I would leave you with is, look, 15 years ago, I go to a cocktail party and they ask what you do and you say cybersecurity and they're like, I'm going to move to the next person. And now when you go to a cocktail party and you say cyber, oh, really? It's either one of two things. Can you fix my computer? Or and so I've moved into the cool kid crowd, and I don't really know how, but it's something the world changed. So
yeah, well, just run with it, man. Run with it while you can. That's it. Us in tech, we got to take our moments while they come, right? They're few and far between. Well, Brian, I so appreciate you coming on, telling us about the Arctic Wolf story, and it's great to watch you. It's great to see you guys grow, and I wish you the best going forward.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, click that like button, hit that subscribe button, because that helps the channel a ton. And if you want to get notified when we post new content, click on that bell icon and you will get notified. And I will see you in the next video.